welcome to this week's Wellness Watch. This week's session comes from our Season 1 recordings that were originally recorded on Learn It Live. I hope if you have any questions, you'll be sure to post them in the comments below. And please be sure to also like and subscribe to our channel so you can get more information on herbal medicine, health, and wellness provided from the Dancing Herbalist. If you want to learn more about the Dancing Herbalist, be sure to visit thedancingherbalist.com and you can find all sorts of information about us there. I hope you enjoy this session today as we look at different cooking challenges. Wellness Watch with the Dancing Herbalist. If you do have any questions throughout the session today, please feel free to type them into the chat window to the side. And today we have Annabelle with us as our lovely guest. Say hello, Annabelle.
Hello.
So for those of you that don't know me yet, my name is Jillian Carnick. I have a Master of Science degree in herbal medicine from the Maryland University of Integrative Health. I'm also a nutritionist, a certified personal trainer, and exercise is medicine professional through the American College of Sports Medicine. And I know that's a big mouthful, but generally what I do is I like to support people through focusing on wellness and movement-related therapies to create a more fulfilling lifestyle and using a little bit of herbs as supplementation. So I love herbs. I am trained as an herbalist, but mostly focus on wellness to support individuals. And now I do run the company, The Dancing Herbalist, and this company focuses on topical herbal products, mostly for joint and muscle pain, but also for skin irritations, sensitivities, and injuries. I've also published the book, A Beginner's Guide to Wellness, which is available through Amazon or through thedancingherbalist.com. And if you are interested in any personalized support for yourself or any other individuals you know, I do offer consultation services as well. And if you're interested in consultation services with myself or any of the other practitioners you hear from on Wellness Watch, you can also contact me through thedancingherbalist.com to schedule those appointments. Now, the Dancing Herbalist does also have a lot of other programs I want to let you know a little bit about before we get going with our discussion today. If you are not yet following the Dancing Herbalist, we do have a newsletter you can join through thedancingherbalist.com. And this is updates every month on our classes, our programs, herbal products, as well as free information on herbal medicine and wellness. At thedancingherbalist.com, you can also purchase any of our products, as well as our products that we have remaining from our sister company, A Balanced Life Wellness. Now that you've joined us on Learn It Live, you can see that we do have some other classes on here as well. Some of them are free and some are paid as well. And these look at different herbal medicine, physiology, nutrition, materia medica, plant identification, a whole bunch of different areas. So I hope you'll take a few minutes to look at those and see what classes will provide you with some new knowledge that you can use to enrich your own life. And if you do have any questions outside of Wellness Watch, we do also have our Facebook discussion group, which I hope you'll feel free to join, see what we have to say in there, and also ask some questions on your own. And now Wellness Watch is sponsored by our Patreon page, so you can join us on Patreon for as low as $1 a month, and this gets you early access to our blogs and some additional content that we might have. Sometimes we'll post posters on there. This February, we are actually doing special blogs and recipes all month long that are all vegan, as I go through a food experimentation month to try to be vegan, to look at different methods of cooking and how my body feels around being vegan, so you can learn from my experiences. And if you are interested in more of our classes, I do recommend joining our Patreon at the Conscious Student level, because this will also get you discounts on many of our Learn It Live classes. Now, as I said before, we do have Annabelle here with us today. Hi, Annabelle. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. So my name is Annabelle, and I'm the author of the Conscious Canary blog, focusing a lot on toxicity issues. I'm also a high-functioning autist, which is a term used in the autism community. I'm a pharmaceutical injury survivor I'm an avid plant-based food explorer and a home herbalist and health advocate.
Excellent. How's your day going, Annabelle?
That's great. I'm excited to join.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on Wellness Watch today, we're mostly going to be talking about cooking challenges. And now, Annabelle, you and I have been talking throughout the day today on what you're having for dinner tonight. Why don't you let our audience know a little bit about what you're cooking and what different challenges you might come across while you're cooking?
Well, tonight is actually an unusual night because I'm doing a little bit of fried food, but I'm making some chimichangas. And I think the big challenges I have in this is, or what I've had in this is finding clean sourced ingredients. Friends of mine do eat meat, so I try to make sure I find something that's free of synthetic hormones, free of genetically modified feed. And of course, whenever it comes to the plants that I use, to make sure they're not grown with systemic pesticides, really pesticides in general, but really focusing on systemic pesticides since you can't actually wash them off of the plant. And
we talked about synthetic pesticides last week, didn't we?
I think we did. And I think we talked a little bit about systemic ones and the difference.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of my first out of the gate whenever it comes to cooking challenges for me is the actual ingredients I'm going to use and finding, and learning about healthy choices in that regard.
So I haven't decided what I'm going to be cooking tonight, but I need to do this. Are there any specific food challenges you find any specific challenges you have with cooking because I mean, you are raw for the most part right now. So
Right.
What does cooking entail when you're eating raw foods?
Well, I tend to just not do foods that I have to cook for a very long time. So things that I can steam up, within a few moments or a few minutes. I don't tend to cook foods right now that are, say beans that require a long cooking period.
Yep.
So I try to, even when I'm eating cooked food, still sort of stay toward the raw direction by not eating, really heavily cooked foods. And then processed foods is something that I find challenging. Being able to cook with whole food ingredients instead of things that are processed.
So you saw that I'm cooking beans today.
I was just going to mention the beans.
Yeah.
I was wondering.
So I was really lucky that this past year I did have a CSA. So for those of you who don't know what a CSA is, that stands for Community Supported Agriculture. We're really lucky that we live here in Frederick, Maryland, because there's a lot of CSA options around here. We have a lot of farmers that go to the farmers markets here in town, and not everybody has these kinds of options. But even in a lot of big cities, you can find farmers that live outside of the city that come and bring their produce in, and you can do a CSA pickup. So basically with a CSA, you pay a farmer a set amount of money at the beginning of the year, and then every week or every other week or every month, whatever that specific program is, you actually get fresh produce from that farmer. So it's a little bit of a gamble because the whole idea is that you're paying the farmer no matter how well they grow their food that year.
Right.
So if it's a bad year, you might get less food, but the farmer can still continue on with their livelihood because they've still made enough money.
Right.
But if it's a really good growing year, you get even more food. So it's a little bit of a gamble, but you're still supporting local agriculture. And even when you're not getting as much food, it's still plenty of food. Like most of the time I can never handle that. So this past year I got food every other week. But for the last few weeks, I was getting a lot of squashes and dried beans. So those keep for a significant amount of time. So I have nice quality squashes that I still have a few of. And I did also have some dried beans as well. So I have these lovely locally grown dried beans. I mean, that's really hard to find. You can't get that most places. I mean, you definitely can't get that at our local co-op.
Right.
So I was really lucky with that. So
And you eat seasonally.
yeah, that's a really nice benefit to having a CSA is it encourages you to eat the foods that are actually growing at that time.
Right.
Because I mean, like it's the middle of the winter now, and I just popped a tomato in my mouth.
Right.
I shouldn't have been able to do that. So
And I bought a watermelon at the store, and I was like, I know this is not the watermelon season.
it is not watermelon season.
It's interesting. I actually heard of a service. I've not tried it, but it might be something for people that have a more difficult time with getting access to fresh, clean, organic food. And it's a service called Imperfect Produce.
I did hear about this.
Right. So I found that pretty interesting. It's something I wanted to check into because from what I understand in the reviews I've seen, it's not moldy, nasty produce. It might just be that it grows odd looking,
just a different shape. Yeah.
Right.
Those weird double carrots.
Right. Right. So I think there are some options for people that don't have, the bounty that we have here. We don't just have CSAs here. We also have two very wonderful organic markets in town.
We do.
And a third one opening up.
Where? Common
Market is opening another location down over by 7th Street.
You did say that, yeah.
Right.
So I don't know if you knew about this. I don't know a lot of details about it, but there's another thing that happens to be in Frederick that I don't know. Again, I don't know a lot of details. I believe it's like once a week there is a market that opens in a building downtown where you pay $1 for a whole bag of produce.
I've heard of this. There really are some interesting programs that I think you can find in your local area, but you just have to dig. And I've been in some areas that are really impoverished, and there is still a market for clean organic food. You just have to really look and dig, and you have to ask questions. I think that's one of the challenges is learning the types of questions to ask.
Yeah, and part of my own experience has been like if a farmer or the person you're talking with doesn't have the answer, then move on to the next person because you don't want them to be accidentally telling you the wrong information. And I think it's really important to know exactly where your food's coming from and make sure the people that are selling it know about the food.
Right. I think that goes to speak to some of the challenges I find with cooking, which is, when I'm eating food, I consider food to be fuel. I mean, I also want it to taste delicious, so that's one thing is taking some of these ingredients that are not very popular and making them taste delicious, but also the nutritional value of the food. Because it really matters the soil that the food is grown in as far as the uptake nutritional value into that plant.
Definitely.
So I think that's something when you're asking questions to try and figure out the soil quality that you have that you're getting the food from. It's not so much about if it's an organic farmer, because you can get organic food that is not nutrient dense.
That's definitely true. And you can, like, it's very easy to eat bad food.
Sure.
It's hard to convince yourself to eat fruits and vegetables, or hard for the average individual to eat fruits and vegetables, primarily because people are worried about the cost, even when they want them. But you can find them cheaper, and if you can't afford to go organic, it's probably better to get non-organic and still get fruits and vegetables than to not. And in the long run, it's definitely cheaper to be eating fruits and vegetables and grains over eating meats and grains.
Right.
They're a lot more calorie and nutrient dense to have those fruits and vegetables. So it's really hard to kind of convince yourself that that's correct because we feel so satisfied when we have filling, heavy, fatty foods.
Absolutely.
And I think that's definitely one of the reasons why I wanted to try being vegan this month was to be like, well, there's definitely other options. I mean, I don't have a terrible diet, but I definitely don't have the best diet. So trying out those new foods, and one of the biggest things is learning how to cook, because so many people get fast foods and things like that. And if cooking is something that you're struggling with, or like learning how to cook yourself, I do have a free class through our Learn It Live that's all about cooking. It's called Spicing Up Your Life, or Spicing Up Your Food. I don't spice up something. And it's not only about how to add herbs and seasonings to your food, but also how to cook a basic thing. Like, how do you actually design a meal?
Right.
Because you and I talk about meal designing all the time. Whenever we're on the phone with each other, we're talking about food.
What are we eating tonight?
And I like that we both inspire each other with new creative food ideas. And like I very much, when I choose to cook something, if I'm designing a meal, so to say, I'm like, I need my vegetables, I need my grains, and I need my proteins, or maybe not necessarily always grains, and I definitely need like fruits and vegetables and a protein. Like, that's kind of how I mix things together. Now, you have different food mixing philosophies because you have so many food combination things. We talked about that a little bit last week.
I think, no matter what your diet is, you can always explore. And I think that's one of the big challenges of cooking, is about having balance, in the sense that sometimes at least for me, whenever I start something new, I just go gung ho, and I end up really stressing myself out a lot, and then I get really anxious about food. And the last thing that we should be anxious about is the food that we're eating. So it can be very overwhelming, and then we can go back to some, not good eating habits.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big challenges for cooking too is that people, especially in our culture, have a really active, busy lifestyle.
Oh, definitely.
And in regard to time management, a lot of people don't have time to come up with a really extensive menu and cook extensive meals every night. And so it is easier just to kind of, call it a wash. So I think one of the big challenges I've had with cooking is learning how to make it simple and still delicious.
Oh, yeah.
So
now, Annabelle, I've watched you cook. It's not simple.
I do have a lot of cooking experience.
I do as well. So my simple things are also still.
But I think that's another speaking. Then you're just really gentle with yourself, and you just give yourself time to learn, and you really keep that fun spirit, that of experimentation, and don't be like, oh man, this didn't turn out right. Not all experiments go well. So you just have to be able to chalk it up and say, never mind.
Yeah, that's not all experiments go well. And being open-minded and tasting everything as you're going. We were talking about how I was going to cook beans, but we don't have to keep talking about beans. That's okay. I just realized that. But
maybe one of the other challenges too, at least for me as a challenge, is getting stuck in a rut and eating the same things repetitively, not really branching out. So I like to try something new, like once a week, just something different and new. I like to make that, put that into my schedule in a time when I have actual time to dedicate to it. Trying to put that into like a Tuesday night when I've got a lot going on or something. I find that, you have to sort of work with your own nature and your own system.
Scheduling is so important for everything we do. I really think like everyone would value from being more scheduled in our lives. I mean, like if you want to be a free spirit, but there's some things that you just have to do. I mean, like, our health is dependent on us having a schedule. I mean, our sleep and our digestive system, those are two huge pieces of our body's health and wellness. And they have to be on a schedule for them to be working optimally.
Absolutely. I think it's very important, at least it's very important for me to keep in mind what I've got going on and just not overwhelming myself. Because like I said, I feel like a lot of times people try and make a lot of attempts to eat healthy, and then it just becomes to be a little too demanding.
So I've got two questions. So the first one, for someone who's not used to cooking, who is scared of the kitchen, other than the microwave, where do you think is a good place to start?
That's really a good question. I think a really good place to start, again, keeping it simple, is smoothies and soups.
I think smoothies is a great one.
I think, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, because you can put one ingredient in at a time and taste it till you find what you like for a taste. So if you screw it up, you've only screwed up with one ingredient. So you haven't screwed up 20 ingredients.
Right.
And you don't have to worry about how long it's in there. It's either done blending or not done blending.
There's no temperature or anything to that
exactly.
nature. And then close behind, I think soups, because, you know, learning how to just lightly steam some veggies, and then you can keep them in chunks, or you can emulsify them or blend them very easily. And you can try different combinations, things of that nature, before you get into more, you know, detailed skill-based cooking. I think for me, that's where I would start.
I personally have always been intimidated by soups.
Really?
And I'm starting to get much better with soups now. I feel better about soups because I personally, when I think of making a soup, I have to cut things. I have to either buy a broth or make a broth. And then I have to know how much of things go in there, because I've definitely made a soup with like 8 cups of vegetable and whoops, there's only 4 cups of broth in there.
Right.
It doesn't really work.
Right.
And then finding which vegetables work well together and which ones don't, or which like proteins go well or don't go well in there. I personally have always been kind of stressed with that, because growing up it was canned soup or tomato soup or something like that. And now that I know how to make tomato soup from scratch, I'm like, that's really hard. I think tomato soup's really hard to make from scratch. I definitely think smoothies are great, definitely great. I was also thinking of sandwiches and salads, because
salads in particular,
because those really, when you're starting to make those, you're only working on 1 or 2 cooking skills at a time, and it's mostly cutting, because knife skills are so challenging.
They really are.
And it's like, I remember I happened to be observing a nutrition class once, and they were learning beginner knife skills, and I was like, look, I've been cooking like crazy for years, and there are some knife skills they're talking about that I have never used. So I'm sure there's many videos on YouTube for learning knife skills, but you got to learn to be like safe and not hurt yourself. And it's very hard, if you want your food to cook evenly, to have them all be the same size when you're cutting something, because it's hard to cut up a carrot, which is thin on one side and big on the other, and have all the carrot pieces be the same size. Now that's the nice thing about learning to cook, though, because that's definitely something you can learn as you go, because some of your carrots might be cooked and some of them might not be cooked, but it's okay. You can eat raw carrots.
Exactly.
It's okay.
That really speaks to that. You know, one of the challenges I have, I obviously don't, as we discussed, I'm a plant-based eater, but I do sometimes prepare meat-based proteins. And even when I did eat them before, you know, years ago, I always found it to be a challenge and intimidating, because I didn't want to. So chicken is something that you can't eat with any, you know, level of having rare to it. But, you know, if you did steak or something like that, you could get away with it. So for me, I was always really nervous, you know, learning how to prepare proteins.
Yeah, so animal proteins are very hard to cook. I definitely think that cooking whole pieces of beef is the safest place to start when cooking that, because cooking ground meat is a whole nother ballgame, because that cooking ground meat has to be cooked all the way through, just like chicken has to be cooked all the way through. So there's a different worry with ground proteins, even though we all want to make a hamburger because it's really easy. It's also really easy to screw up.
Right.
So I think like when you go to a grocery store and you see the really thin sliced meat, the thin sliced, whether that be chicken or pork or beef, or turkey, whatever, I would definitely say when you're starting to learn to cook animal proteins, start with the really thin cuts and don't try to go for the like medium rare or even medium. Just get it all the way cooked, because as you learn, you'll see how uncooked you can get it safely. But like chicken does have to be cooked all the way through. My personal preference for cooking chicken in learning to cook is to poach it.
Which I found poaching to be more intimidating.
The reason I like poaching chicken, I think, one, you accidentally make broth with it.
Which is nice.
Because you can use all that water later for something else.
Right.
And you can't really over poach it. It's either done or not done.
Right.
And you can't, it's not going to charcoal or anything like that like it would in the oven or on the stove. It's once it's cooked. And you can use them. Definitely having a meat thermometer, I think, is very important. Especially when you're learning to cook things. Like they have those whole, like you pinch your hand and you with different fingers and you can get the different densities of like well done and done. And no, don't do that. Get a meat thermometer.
And maybe even printing out a chart of the different temperatures, because the different meats have different temperatures.
Yes. So my meat thermometer actually on the thermometer itself has different lines for which meat.
Oh, great.
So it says like at this temperature, this meat is done. At this temperature, this meat is done. At this temperature, it's great. And chicken is the higher temperature. So that's why chicken is very important to really get it cooked all the way.
And I wouldn't start with any type of wild game.
No. While that would be lovely to eat and have in our diets, I would say turkey would be the most wild. I would go with definitely learning to cook. I mean, and like if you do go to cook a whole turkey, that you 100% need a meat thermometer for that. You can't do it otherwise. But even if you're just cooking like a turkey leg or something like that, I would still also suggest having a meat thermometer to really make sure it's really cooked all the way. But I think the other, like we could talk about beans and lentils and things like that for proteins as well. But I think one really important one, which is a great thing that's somewhat inexpensive to try to cook with, that's a protein that you can cook in lots and lots of different ways, it's eggs.
Yes, eggs are underrated.
Yeah, we were talking about eggs earlier.
Right.
It's really the one thing that I've been really missing when it comes to proteins or animal-based proteins this month while being vegan. Are eggs something you cook at all?
I do cook eggs. Eggs were actually the last animal-based protein that I eliminated from my diet. So I held on to eggs for quite a while. But I cook for, family and friends, and I use eggs quite often. So, I mean, if you have challenges cooking and you start with eggs, scrambled eggs is going to be your easiest way to go.
Scrambled eggs and hard-boiled eggs, I think.
Yeah. Although hard-boiled eggs, I find that there's so many different recommendations.
So many.
Different times, things of that nature. I always do a 12-minute egg.
That's a long egg.
But I don't keep it boiling. I put the egg in and I let it come to a boil. Then I put the lid on and I take it off the heat and I let it sit for 12 minutes. And then I put it in an ice bath and it turns out perfectly. Of course, this came with many failed experiments, which we just made reference to.
Yeah, but I think that's it. When you're making hard-boiled eggs, as long as it's in the water for 6+ minutes, you've got a cooked egg.
Right. And I know that people don't really feel very safe with raw eggs, but eggs are actually something that you can ingest raw without as much of an issue as something like undercooked meat or something of that nature.
So seeing we're talking more about hard-boiled eggs, let's keep talking about them. We'll talk about some other kinds of egg things. So definitely with making a hard-boiled egg, it's very simple because you just boil water and then you add your eggs. Now the main place where people can mess up really easily is adding the eggs, I think, because they can break so easily.
I never add them, and I put them in with the cold water, and I don't add them to boiling water. I found that when I do it the other way, my egg.
I think that's why you're doing 12 minutes.
Right. So it's a longer egg. It takes a little bit longer, but I would always end up with cracked shells and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Doing it this way tended to make it where I wasn't breaking the egg while I did it.
So my trick, so to say, I'm sure other people do this too, is so I get my water to a rolling boil. It has a little bit of salt in it, just for a flavor, and then I turn it down a little bit so it's on like a simmer, so it's actually still bubbling. And then I put my egg on a spoon, and then put the spoon into the water.
That's a good idea.
And I put each egg, however many eggs I'm cooking in, that way. So that way they're not getting the poop from the boil right away. And then I'll turn it back up a little bit so it's boiling again.
Right.
And now I like a little softer boiled egg. So you can have a hard boiled egg or a soft boiled egg. My understanding is that when you're technically timing eggs, it starts from when you, like you said, when you add the egg to the water, but generally someone adds the egg when it's already boiling. So my understanding is a soft boiled egg is about a 6-minute egg. So if the water is boiling, you add your egg, and then 6 minutes, take it out. And that's a softer egg. So basically the center of the yellow is still going to be a little uncooked, not much.
Right.
Like 5-minute eggs, it's going to be still pretty gooey on the middle, but like 6 minutes, it's actually a hard boiled egg. It's just softer in the middle. And then 8 is considered to be like a hard boiled egg. And then after that is very hard boiled. Now the way you do your 12-minute egg, do you notice any green around the edge of your yolk? Yeah.
No, but I think it's because it's not actually cooking for 12 minutes.
Right. It's definitely not the way you're describing it.
So that's interesting. There's so many different variations of cooking and how people do things. And that could probably be overwhelming for people that are just starting to cook too,
definitely.
You know, so again, I think just having a sense of curiosity and experimentation. You know?
Definitely, yeah. When all cooking is like that. And one of the things I like about hard-boiled eggs instead of scrambled eggs is that you don't break the yolk.
Right.
And one of the things about not breaking the yolk when you're cooking is that the yolk then is not exposed to as much heat. So the natural cholesterols in there don't have the chance to degrade as much. So some people are worried about cholesterol in eggs, and I don't think we need to worry about it. But if you're getting cholesterol in a lot of other areas of your life, maybe eggs is just the top of that bucket. But if you're not breaking the yolks, the cholesterol isn't getting as damaged. So it's a little healthier of cholesterol if you're not breaking the yolks.
Which is why I think hard-boiled or boiled eggs is a healthier option than scrambling.
I agree completely. But scrambled eggs,
boiled for scramble.
Depending on your pan. Definitely depending on your pan. If you have a good quality pan, you might not need oil. But a lot of people even though I don't generally have like regular milk, I'll still use almond milk. I will still use almond milk in my eggs because it adds a little bit more of a fluffiness to it. And I think it's very easy to not like scrambled eggs if you don't know to add milk of some kind to it, because they get very dry very quickly.
Right.
And the other thing about scrambled eggs is that I think the average individual, when they have scrambled eggs, is that they overcook them.
Right.
So.
Well, it's really easy to do. I mean, it only takes a few extra moments of sitting there, and you really have to get that stuff off the heat before.
Yeah, because even if you take the pan off the heat, it's still in the hot pan. So
So the eggs, like, scrambled eggs would be something you would want to make and eat immediately, which again is why I think hard boiled is great, because you can make it. And we were talking about salads. You can put them on salads. You can
definitely.
You can have one as a snack by itself.
Now, I generally think that hard-boiled eggs are maybe good for like 8 hours unrefrigerated right after they've been cooked, or maybe like 24 to 36 hours in the fridge after they've been cooked. Do you think that's about?
Yeah, I think so. But I don't tend to let them sit around for very long.
No, yeah, they really can't.
But you want to let them cool all the way before you refrigerate them, which I think is important about any type of protein, even beans that you cook. So
why do you think this?
I think the bacterial content raises in them whenever you don't let them cool all the way. So proteins, whenever I am cooking proteins, I make sure that everything's cool before I refrigerate them. It's always been a standard sort of practice.
When I think of letting something cool before I refrigerate it, I'm mostly thinking of the condensation that would then happen in the refrigerator, which the condensation generally just, there's more water, it's weird, it can change the texture of things. Right. That's generally what I'm thinking of. But
well, going back to salads, because now we were talking about eggs. We were about eggs on salads. When we're talking about making salad dressings, I think that's another really good opportunity for people to get into mixing different ingredients together and seeing how they taste.
Yep.
And also adding herbs.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think adding herbs to food can be intimidating. You have to add fresh herbs at different times in different quantities as opposed to dry herbs. And it can be a little.
And fresh herbs can be really expensive too.
Right.
And I mean, I know even myself, I don't buy fresh herbs very often because I think they're just so expensive, unless it's something like I know I'm going to use all of it right away. Because I mean, I'm not going to use 2 cups of parsley a day. So I'm not going to like buy parsley to use just a little bit of it. But I will buy basil. So one thing I will do with fresh herbs, so fresh herbs that I would put into oil, things like basil, thyme, rosemary, things like that I would eventually want in the oil. Whatever I don't use in whatever recipe it calls for, I will chop it up and mix it with oil and freeze it in ice cube trays.
Right.
So then I'll still have that freshness and it'll already be in the cooking oil that I want it to be in.
Right.
Or
you can even add it just into water.
Or water, but like I wouldn't
smoothies or things of that nature.
Exactly, yeah. So that would be more for like the parsley and the cilantro. Mint would be a good one. Yeah, yep. Right. Because then also with the mint, if you have it frozen in an ice cube in water, just put it in hot water and you got tea. Exactly. Right. Super simple.
Yeah, I think, the other thing too is planning. But then there's
What's your phrase, Annabelle?
Prior proper planning prevents poor performance.
Say it again a little slower. I love this. I love it so much.
You can tell I was raised in a military. But there's there's planning, but then there's over planning. So I tend to like to plan my meals in 2 to 3 day chunks instead of a week worth of meals.
Okay. I can see why that would serve an average individual mostly because that's how good food for most part stays fresh. But and a lot of people though, that means you have to go grocery shopping twice a week.
True. And I do tend to go grocery shopping twice a week because I like my ingredients to be fresh, or as fresh as possible. So, but there's also things that you can do real simple, like you were saying, it's just freeze ingredients. And, but I think that's another part of the whole cooking process, of course, is planning what you're going to cook.
Yep.
So, and a lot of times, life happens while we're making plans. And what I found is that because I used to try and plan my meals for a week, and I found that when I would do that for a week, I would get off of the plan because, I had to go get breaks done or something on that night and whatever, something popped up. So I found it just to be a little too overwhelming to do a week in advance. I could also, when I get back from the market, is usually when I do the processing of my foods.
What do you mean by that? Because I mean, I do the same exact thing, but I don't think the average person does this.
Making sure that you clean them. That's a really big thing that not everybody does when they get fresh produce at the market. So making sure that you clean them. I like to go ahead and chop my stuff up. I like to just do the work right then. And then in the week when I'm busy and it's time for dinner, I can just go in, I can grab my chopped peppers or whatever I need, toss it into my soup or salad or what have you. And it's easy, from that point forward. Because I think cooking can sometimes end up being a chore instead of a fun blessing.
Yeah. And yeah, so going to the grocery store, anything that you're getting, whether it be fruits or vegetables or anything, and right when you get home, making sure it's washed, and if it's going to be cut up, cutting it up right away, and then putting it into the refrigerator. I know for myself, I just purchased a whole bunch of fruit a week ago, so making sure that anything that I needed to ripen further was all sitting together, so that the fruits could use the ethanol from each other to actually help each other ripen, and getting all of my fruits washed so that I could freeze the ones that I was going to freeze, and getting my vegetables cut. And it's a process. It takes some time. You have to really prepare ahead of time. You can't just go to the store, come home, throw things in the fridge, and go about your day.
Well, you can if you want it to be a complicated process, and always time consuming, which I think is the difficulty too that people have with cooking, is there's so much time involved. So I don't tend to do leftovers. I know a lot of people do. But if I were going to cook something that was really time, labor intensive, I would make it where I made a large quantity and then I could save some for leftovers. So, but I just don't tend to do that personally.
So what I did this past week, I made the lovely lemongrass tofu dish. And it was amazing. And if you want to get the recipe for it, it's on the Dancing Herbalist Patreon page. So it's right on there. And what I did was I made the tofu with all of the seasonings and everything, and then the onions. That was all cooked together, but I didn't eat just that, and I made a larger portion of that. Separately, I cut up vegetables and noodles, and I had noodles and vegetables, and that I had separately. So I made that fresh each day. So I had fresh vegetables cut up, fresh noodles, and then I could warm up the portion of tofu and cooked onions that I wanted and add that. So some of it was pre-prepared, like the cooking, the time-intensive part, but then the less time-intensive part I could make fresh that day, because those things didn't keep as well, because all of the noodles that I use are all gluten-free, and gluten-free noodles don't keep very well.
Right. Yeah, they don't. They get very gummy.
They do. Or they will even just completely re-dry out, and it's just basically dried pasta again.
That's a really good point. I think the other thing whenever it comes to that is, knowing what you can do in advance. Like leafy greens, if you're going to make a salad, that's not something that you want to clean 2 or 3 days in advance, unless you have a really good salad spinner that gets all the moisture off.
Because they'll start to wilt.
Right.
If they're very wet, they will wilt.
So usually if I'm going to have a salad in the evening with dinner, I usually soak my greens through the day for 6 to 8 hours during the day, and then I make my salad.
I don't think the average person does that.
What do you use? For me, what I use is I use baking soda water. I have a little jar of baking soda right next to my sink with a spoon in it, and then any vegetables that I have that need to get cleaned or what have you, I use that.
And I'm so glad I've learned this from you. I haven't started doing it, but I think that's a really valuable method of cleaning off produce. And it's not something I had ever thought of doing. And so basically you're using it kind of both as like a scrub for let's say carrots and zucchini and things like that, but then also for your more leafy things, you use it as a soak,
Right.
so to say, so they can actually sit in there for an amount of time, and then you just rinse them off.
Yeah, I just
afterwards.
put a teaspoon, of baking soda in the water and let it soak. You don't want to put too much baking soda because you'll kind of change the structure of the plant itself.
Yeah.
So, but I see a lot of produce rinses, that are really chemical based, and they're expensive.
Yep.
So something like baking soda is cheap, and it's also not caustic.
Yep.
So that tends to be. I used to do a lot of buying, stuff at the store to clean produce and things of that nature, and I started looking more into the ingredients and thinking, oh, I really don't feel good about putting this on my produce. And that's how I got into baking soda. A friend of mine suggested it a couple years ago. And like I said, I have a little jar.
Yep.
And, if I have a carrot, I just wet the carrot a little bit. I sprinkle a little bit of baking soda. I use my hand and I just clean it right off. Or you could use a brush if you wanted. But it works very well. It's quite simple.
Now, when you do that, are you still peeling your carrots? Because I know you peel carrots usually.
It depends. Sometimes I won't. For myself personally, because of the digestive issues I have, I tend to, but I wouldn't feel bad about keeping the skin on there after it was cleaned that way. I do keep skin on with potatoes or sweet potatoes because I usually make those in a soup. So that's the other thing that's great about soups and smoothies is you give your body a jump start on digestion. So
yeah, let's go back to soups and smoothies. So the thing that I keep thinking of every time we've said smoothies, I was like, when I first started making smoothies for myself, I didn't like the taste of them. And that was because I was so used to so much sugar, so much refined sugar. So even though it was full of fruits, and I mean, like now I use like protein powders in there too. It didn't taste good because I was expecting more of a sweetness.
Right.
So I think adding things like maple syrup, I think, is a really good thing to add to smoothies. And especially when you're first starting to switch your taste profile, what you actually enjoy tasting. I think having the forgiveness to yourself to put sweeteners into smoothie is okay.
Right.
Because it's better to get the fruit and whatever else you've put in there than to make it and not drink it.
And then another thing you could use is dates. Dates are a wonderful sweetener, but if you're going to put them in a smoothie, if they're not fresh, tender dates, which usually when you get them, they're not. They're usually refrigerated. They're a little bit harder and dry. Usually what I do first thing in the morning, because I don't eat first thing in the morning, I usually do my lemon water or my tea. And, I usually wait 2 to 3 hours to eat after waking up. But within 20 minutes, you can have some nice soaked dates. So in my blender, when I wake up, I usually put my dates, I put some water in there, and I just let them soak for a bit.
So you don't blend them yet?
I don't blend them because I found one of the things I didn't like about smoothies is there were chunks in there, and I would have these little bits
of the dates,
and I didn't like that. I wanted my stuff to be really smooth, like a smoothie, you know? So I was like, wow. So I found that when I put the dates in water and let them soak for at least 20 minutes, that it would blend more uniform and smoothly from there.
I remember one of my biggest mistakes that I made with smoothies was putting blueberries in.
Oh,
so
interesting.
If you put too many blueberries in, because blueberry seeds are high in pectin.
Oh, so it would get really thick.
It would get really super thick.
Right.
So I love blueberries. I never thought blueberries would do this to my smoothie. But yeah, if you're going to put blueberries into a smoothie, just a few blueberries.
Even apple skin.
Apple skin the same way. Anything that's high in pectin.
Bananas too.
But bananas, I think, keep it the thickness of bananas. The blueberries made it way more thick. It was almost like a gelatin kind of sensation. So just a few blueberries if you're doing blueberries. But that being said, if you want a thicker smoothie, add more blueberries.
A lot of times I make what I call pudding, but it's really not pudding. It's just a really thick smoothie because sometimes I like the fullness, it's more of the brain. My brain thinks I'm more full whenever I eat something that I have to sit and eat with a spoon or a fork instead of just drinking it down. So a lot of times I like to make just a nice big bowl. We all know I really love bananas. So my smoothie or my pudding, my breakfast this morning was 5 bananas and 4 dates. So
dates are also really high in iron, aren't they? Yeah, that can be really good.
And they're really high in calories. And for people, there's, everyone has different issues when it comes to weight, and people that have issues with overweight are not the only group of people. There's a lot of people, especially in the communities that I deal with, the people that have pharmaceutical injury, that have really difficult time with being extremely underweight. So dates are a phenomenal way to get some good calories in. And if you eat a plant-based diet like I do, it's not really calorie rich.
Yeah.
So
you have to eat more food.
Right, you have to eat more food, or you have to eat more food that has a lot of calories to it. So I don't shy away from dried fruits and things of that nature because I like getting some calories in. So, but any kind of dried fruit you could put in,
I personally, I know I've shown this to you before. I like to make a sorbet.
Yeah.
It's very easy to make a fruit sorbet, especially when you're using bananas as your base. So I like to freeze my bananas ahead of time because I think they have a little bit more texture, and use frozen fruit, but just like bananas, raspberries, blueberries, blackberry, anything you'd like. I mean, you could do mango in there, and just blend it up with like a whole bunch of banana. I think maybe 5 or 6 bananas, and then maybe a half a cup to a cup of other fruit. And they'll be lovely, beautiful colors. You can freeze it, and then you have this sorbet that you can just have whenever. And because it's frozen, it's not really going to go bad anytime.
It's a great snack. And the other one is nice,
which is very, very similar.
Exactly. You can make a wonderful nice cream. You can put any, that's one thing I don't like about store-bought ice cream is you can't really choose the ingredients that you're going to use. So you can use coconut milk or almond milk or no milk, or what have you, or regular milk. So nice cream, though, is a lovely, wonderful treat, especially in the summer.
So what is this?
Oh, nice cream is basically a sorbet in a sense. It's just a blended ice cream. I like to make mine with bananas and strawberries. Freeze them first, and you add a little bit of your liquid base. And I guess it's a little bit thicker than the pudding that I make in the morning.
The same thing, yeah.
Just a really thick, it's a super thick smoothie. And you can put it in the freezer in a container and just scoop it out like ice cream.
Yeah, I think I told you what I made this past week. Was I kind of secretly stole a recipe off of a packaged food that I bought, but I basically made peanut butter nice cream equivalent. So it's basically just water, peanuts, and sweetener, and then a little bit of vanilla. It's basically all it was. And I was amazed at how well it worked. And the whole recipe for it, I also put that on Patreon too. So it's really nice. And that one has protein in it too, because it's mostly nuts. I mean, you could do the same thing with almonds or walnuts, or I don't think I would like to do it with cashews, but you could do it.
You could do it with cashews.
Yeah, you could do it with any of those.
I think, do you soak yours before? Did you soak the?
I didn't soak the peanuts, but what I did get is I got raw peanuts that I then roasted myself, so I could make sure that they were not overcooked, because I think that's so many that we get from stores are too cooked. But something you could definitely sprout them beforehand. But I think I don't know how often you have raw peanuts, or if you know the taste, but the taste of raw peanuts is very different because peanuts are a bean, so the taste is very different once they're roasted. And I almost think like raw peanuts almost taste more like pistachios. They don't taste like pistachios, but it's more
that flavor.
like that
Right.
than compared to like walnuts when they're slightly more like walnuts when they're cooked. But I think it'd be a very different flavor if you didn't roast the peanuts.
Absolutely.
A little bit, but yeah.
I think so. I mean, cooking changes the flavor of things.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely. So I think, with cooking, it's, exploring those different flavors together, maybe keeping it really simple. So, I like to use the mental thought of like a mirepoix.
I don't know what that word means.
It's a French cooking term, which is, so if you're making a soup base, your mirepoix would be garlic, onions, and carrots. It's like 3 different things that you use as a base.
Okay.
So keeping it really simple that way. And honestly, I think there's a lot of different ingredients that people can use. That's one thing I learned in cooking is that less is more.
Mm-hmm.
I had a girlfriend in Miami who was Italian, and I remember I went over to her house for dinner, and she made this pasta, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is the best pasta I've ever put in my mouth. It has to probably have 30 different things in it, because I've just never had this explosion of flavor. And it literally had 4 ingredients.
It's the best.
I couldn't believe it. So I think when people are first starting out cooking and they get recipes or things of that nature, keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Not adding too much. That can really change the flavor of what you're eating into something that might not be, very, very good tasting. So.
I think one thing when you're starting to cook yourself is to read the labels of things that you already buy, so you know what's in them. Because you might be like, oh, this has this in it, and then it's like, oh, I could learn how to do something with this new fruit or vegetable or a different kind of grain. For instance, these crackers that your son likes that I also just happened to come across. These are cauliflower-based crackers. I mean, like they're not grain crackers. So just this concept of, oh, you could make crackers out of cauliflower.
Right.
I mean, I have a recipe that I use to make crackers out of cashews, but that's a nut. It's a little bit more dense. Cauliflower isn't dense like that. I mean, for a vegetable, it's pretty dense, but just that these new different ideas. So be creative and explore new things, read labels, start simple. Meat's challenging.
Right.
Get a meat thermometer.
Right.
Try recipes.
Right. Definitely try recipes. I mean, you're talking about cauliflower.
Yeah.
One of the best things I've tried lately, as of late, was one of my trying something new and different. And I made a raw zoodle, which is like how I eat pasta is usually zucchini noodles. But I made an Alfredo sauce with the base of it being cauliflower.
There you go.
It was delicious.
So Google is your friend.
Yes.
And searching for recipes. I think trying recipes and screwing up recipes is one of the best ways to learn to cook.
It really is. I mean, it is. It really, really is. So, for every wonderful, successful dish that I have that I feel is like cookbook worthy, there's several failed attempts.
Oh, yes. Oh, definitely. And one of the things that I found with my cooking, that even when I feel like it's going to be a disaster, if I am cooking for someone else, it always tastes better.
It does. Because when you cook for me, it always tastes better.
Same.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing people can do is
definitely,
in your local area. A lot of restaurants will have cooking lessons. That's a great way to get out.
It's also a great way to try new recipes that you might not normally do, or different kinds of cuisine. Like if you are like the average American, lots of tomato grain meat dishes, then instead of going Italian, go to an Asian restaurant and take a cooking class there, or to let's say, an Ethiopian restaurant to take a cooking class there. That could be really delicious. Because there's going to be different flavors, different kinds of, and trying different foods that you might not normally eat when you're eating out, because there are going to be different kinds of flavors to expand your own palate, to try new things.
And someone there, when you're eating out, has experience with cooking them.
Exactly.
And then I think being really exploratory with spices can really change. I mean, you can make a dish, like we were talking the other day, I made zoodles and I made it with guacamole.
There you go. Yeah,
so I had Mexican type, or Tex-Mex type style pasta. And I do that sometimes with Asian sauce. I just make a different variety of. You can take the same base and then you can turn that into so many different things when you explore a spice.
Yeah.
And it was really delicious. You and my partner, I mentioned it to you guys that I was going to do it, and both of you guys were like, I don't think I would like that.
Yeah, I don't think I would go for avocado on zucchini.
But I have to say, it was delicious. So my partner was there when I was eating it. I was just saying, you really don't know what you're missing. This is really good stuff. So, but I do, you mentioned going through the palate change.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing to take into consideration, because when I first, I don't really eat processed foods. I mean, occasionally I'll cheat with something like I did today with some pumpkin seeds, but, giving your palate time to get adjusted to cooking different foods.
So Annabelle,
that's great.
This has been a lovely past hour. Sorry to everyone if you had trouble with the first 10 minutes of the recording, but I hope you found it and you enjoyed this week's Wellness Watch. My lovely little cat here is ready for dinner, so we must get going.
Yes.
But we'll be back next week with our next session of Wellness Watch. Let's see, what is our topic next week?
Exciting.
Next week, we're going to be talking about eating vegan and raw food. So we're going to be looking a little bit more about what I've been doing the past few weeks, and also I'm going to get a few more pointers from Annabelle. And
love me some vegan raw food.
And I'll learn some new things, and maybe I'll even have some good questions for you, Annabelle. And if anybody has any questions they want to bring, we're open to talking about any different topics through these, even if it's off topic from ours. So please bring your own questions. And we look forward to seeing you all next week. You guys have a great day and great week. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.